Hi guys, and welcome back to It's Prophetic with your girl Ali.Luuu. So we are back in chapter 25 and 26 of our Book of Acts Bible study. So where do we leave off? We leave off in chapter 24 where Paul is before Felix and with his wife Drusilla, and they're listening to Paul. And remember about the whole inconvenience thing. Whenever the conviction was hitting, they would send Paul away. And then we end off verse 27 of chapter 24. It says, after 2 years had passed, Felix was succeeded by Festus, and because Felix wanted to grant a favor to the Jews, he left Paul in prison. So Paul has been locked up for 2 years, and now leadership is changed. Felix is replaced with Festus. Okay, so now Festus is ruling. He's the new governor of Judea, and he goes to Jerusalem right away. We enter chapter 25, and it says 3 days after arriving in the province, Festus went up from Caesarea to Jerusalem. So he goes there, and obviously as a political leader of Judea, he's moving smart. He goes to Jerusalem because it's obviously the central of Judea. It's the central of religious and cultural culture of the people under his jurisdiction. So of course he would go there, and it's ASAP. He doesn't wait. It says 3 days after he arrives to Caesarea. So after his term begins, he goes straight away to Jerusalem to obviously maybe discuss with the religious leaders to make them feel like, oh, okay, like, this guy, like, yeah, to begin to feel how they are, to gain favor with the people, and to be like, okay, what can I do for you, to see how he can kind of win them. So we bring Paul back up, where at verse 2 it says, the chief priests and the Jewish leaders appeared before him, and they presented their charges against Paul. And it's kind of like time. He's been locked up for 2 years. Let's deal with this guy once and for all, kind of thing. So they asked to move him to Jerusalem. Remember, this has always been a thing. They always wanted to set an ambush and kill Paul, or trick the Roman leaders to bringing Paul this place or that place or whatever, so that they can catch him on the way and kill him. And they asked for Paul's release as a favor. And as he's early on in his rulership, so if he gives the religious leaders a favor, it's like a win. They have him, he has them, and we promise to submit. You give us this favor, and we got you, and all of that. But Festus said, nah, y'all come with me to Caesarea if you actually want to deal with this. And it goes to show that it's really God who's with Paul, because remember in the vision, God in his call, God tells him, like, I'm gonna send you before kings and all of that. So to us it might look like, dang, he's suffering, but this is all part of his call to go before kings and those higher up, and to bring the gospel to those who are very influential in the time back then. So his trials and everything is to bear witness to the gospel of Jesus Christ. So we're at verse 6, and it says, after spending 8 or 10 days with them, Festus went down to Caesarea. The next day they had court, and Paul came before them. And when Paul came in, the Jews who had come down from Jerusalem stood around him, and they brought many serious charges against him, but they could not prove him. They brought many serious charges, but they could not prove them. It's the same charges as before, that he was a disruptor of peace. He was against, the Roman system of things, but they could not prove any of the charges. And Paul defends himself. He's like, bruh, y'all know that I done no wrong. Like, just like, what are you doing? I'm not going to give in and just say, okay, fine, I did something. I did no wrong, and I'm gonna continue to defend my innocence. And it's clear that Festus himself also sees Paul's innocence. Let's read verse 9. It says, Festus, wishing to do the Jews a favor, said to Paul, are you willing to go up to Jerusalem and stand trial before me there on these charges? And with that, it's like, okay, like, he's talking to Paul, because one, there's really no reason for him to give in to the Jewish leaders, because it's clear of Paul's innocence. but he still wants to give them a favor. That's why he's like trying to convince Paul to move to Jerusalem. Because remember, Paul is a Roman citizen. That's why they can't just toy with him however they want, because he knows his rights, and as a Roman citizen, he has more rights than he would if he was just a regular Jew like the others. So he asks Paul, a prisoner, permission to go to Jerusalem. He wouldn't be giving up his jurisdiction, because he's the governor of Judea, and he would stand before Festus regardless, but just in Jerusalem. And Festus, he will still judge the trial, but he wants to grant the Jews a favor. And it takes us back to Felix, who also wanted to grant the Jews a favor. It takes us back to Pilate with Jesus, who also wanted to grant the Jews a favor. All these people, they're people pleasers. They are ready to ignore the truth and to make the innocent suffer if it will cause them to please people who will benefit them in their own rise in their jobs or position or whatever. And Festus is falling under the same trap. And Paul knows that if he goes to Jerusalem, he's kind of cooked, so he's like, yeah, no. So he tells Felix, he's like, I'm innocent, and you're just gonna judge me now. To be honest, judge me now, or what? Now we all know that I didn't do anything. If you're trying to kill me and I'm guilty, then I'm gonna let you kill me, but I'm not guilty, so please leave me alone. And then Paul ends up by appealing to Caesar. So this right to appeal to Caesar was something only Roman citizens are able to do, and that's why Paul does it. And this takes his case beyond. So it's Jerusalem is just whatever, and then you move to Caesarea, to where he is there, and then you move to Rome, and it's when it's to Rome, it's to the emperor, and it's okay, this is the highest you can go, and the emperor is not going to just take anybody's case. If you're not a Roman citizen and your case is not that deep, it's just please don't waste my time kind of thing. So he appeals to Caesar, and he has this right. So the case is going to Rome, and he saw that Festus was persuadable by Jews to have Paul handed over, so he decided to appeal to the emperor. And then we get to verse 13. And verse 13, King Agrippa and Bernice, they arrive at Caesarea. So they arrive at Caesarea to congratulate Festus on his new role, his new position as the governor. King Agrippa, he's the son of Herod, the one mentioned in chapter 12. And then Bernice is his sister, but there are rumors apparently that they had some sort of incestuous relationship, but we don't know if they did. That's nasty, but yeah, that's them. So Festus basically summarizes Paul's trial to the king, to King Felix, and not to King Felix, to King Agrippa, and what happened with Felix and all of that. And Agrippa's like, man, I'm trying to hear this man for myself. And then Festus is like, okay, no problem. Tomorrow he's gonna come and you can hear him. And we get to verse 23. And it says, the next day Bernice and Agrippa, they come with great pomp, and they enter with audience and whatever. And then in the room, there's high-ranking military officers and prominent men of the city. And at the command of Festus, Paul was brought in. Festus said, King Agrippa and all who are present with us, you see this man, the whole Jewish community has petitioned me about him in Jerusalem and here in Caesarea, shouting that he ought not to live any longer. So basically, he to kind of summarize what continues on, he's like, okay, let him talk a little more, and King Agrippa, maybe you can help me to find more information, because if I'm going to write a letter to Rome, it needs to be clear, it needs to be with evidence. I need more, because what I have right now is nothing. There's no case against this guy. So maybe after this I can actually have things to put in my letter that I'm going to send to the emperor to deal with Paul's case, because Paul has appealed to Caesar. And we continue on through chapter 26, and the story continues. And King Agrippa, he permits Paul to speak. And in verse 2, Paul begins his defense. He begins to share, these people, they're accusing me, but I'm innocent, all of that. But he begins in a smart way. And he's like, okay, King Agrippa, I know you are well acquainted with the Jewish custom. So listen to me and let me explain to you. And of course, with respect and honor and everything. And he's like, yo, it's an honor to be before you and all of that. And he obviously shares his testimony and his calling. And that's something that nobody can take away from you. Nobody can tell you or fight against you, because it's your experience. It's what you went through. It's your story. So that's what he does. He's like, okay, these people, these Jewish people, they have known me. And if they're willing to testify, they can testify that they know me. I come from the strictest tribe of our religion, not tribe, sect of our religion. I'm a Pharisee. Like, everybody knows my family and the line we come from, that we are strict religious people. I am a Pharisee. I was a Pharisee, Paul says. And then he's like, why should any of you consider it incredible that God raises the dead? He's like, bro, like, we believe in a miraculous God. Look at Moses and what he did with the Red Sea. Look at Elijah and what he did with the bird. Look what he did with this person and that person and this person. Like, all the miracles in the Old Testament, that they're scriptures, that's the God we serve. So why is it such a huge thing? Even with Elijah, like, there was a boy who died, and they went on him and he rose up from the dead. Like, this is not something that is so incredible when it comes to our God, because it's our God. It's different because it's our God. So that's the point that Paul is making. How are you thinking that it's incredible for God to raise somebody from the dead? And then he goes on to talk about his story. He said, I was obsessed. It was literally an obsession of Paul to go and find people who were Christians and persecute them and bring them to their death. He was obsessed with persecuting them. He even hunted them down in foreign cities. He went above and beyond where he was and his surrounding. He would go to foreign cities, places he had no business being in, just to find these people, because he was obsessed with persecuting them. And then he has an encounter with God, and God speaks to him, and God tells him, it is hard for you to kick against the goads, basically telling him, you cannot deny your calling. Paul, I have called you, and you are not going to go against it. This is what you were made for, to preach my word, to bring souls into my kingdom, and your testimony actually is going to be a witness to many about what I'm able to do. And he's like, I'm saying nothing beyond what the prophets and Moses said would happen. So he goes, and he's not preaching a new message. He's continuing the prophecies that was given to them as Jewish people, this Messiah they're waiting for. He's like, why are we waiting? Here it is. I'm not saying anything more than what's in our scriptures. Jesus Christ is the fulfillment of this. And that's the message that he preaches to King Agrippa. And then Festus interrupts, and he calls him crazy. He's like, bro, at this point, you kind of tripping. And well, Festus is not Jewish, right? So all these things are foolishness to them. And he was a Roman. But Paul says, listen, I'm talking to Agrippa, and he understands. He knows what I'm talking about. And it's really not crazy. In fact, the Christian movement and the events of Christ is not secret, but is widespread news. Therefore, Agrippa definitely heard about it in some kind of way. It's not something secret, and it's not the first time for him to hear it through Paul. Maybe elaborately, yes, but I'm sure, Agrippa, about this, you've heard about this. So Paul asks Agrippa a question, and he's like, do you believe the prophets? I know you do. And Agrippa answers, he's like, do you really think you're gonna convert me and make me a Christian right now? Do you really think so? And this is actually him trying to avoid the question, because if he were to answer it honestly, he's kind of stuck. Because if he was to say no, then that means he denies the prophets. And if he were to say yes, then Paul would push him to receive Christ, because Christ is the fulfillment of these prophecies. So what does he do? He avoids the question by asking a question. Do you really think you can convert me to Christ? But Paul, what he says, it's very beautiful, and I really love this verse. Verse 29 of chapter 6. Paul says, short time or long, I pray to God that not only you, but all who are listening to me today may become what I am, except for these chains. He's like, yes, I do want you to be a Christian. I'm hoping to convert you to Christ. I want you all, not just you, but everybody else here in this place right now hearing me. My desire is for you all to become Christians, because I know that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. And as it is my mission to preach him, I genuinely want you guys to experience him and to be saved. So yes, Agrippa, yes, my answer is yes. I want to convert you today, not for the sake of conversion, but for the sake of your salvation. Okay? And that's just such a beautiful answer. And then the Bible tells us that, Agrippa, he rose up with him, and with him the governor Bernice and those who were sitting with them, and they left the room, and they began saying to one another, "This man is not doing anything that deserves death or imprisonment." So they saw him with human eyes, but God had him right where he wanted him, before kings and rulers. Because in verse 32 it tells us that Agrippa says to Festus, this man could have been set free if he had not appealed to Caesar. But that was again part of Paul's calling, not with man's agenda, but with God's agenda. It looks like a mess. Why is he going through all of this trouble? But it's part of his calling to go and stand even before Rome to bring the gospel of Jesus Christ. There is so much that Paul went through for the sake of Christ, and standing before these big rulers, nobody would want to, because especially his position, being in jail and being accused and all of that, you don't want to stand before those people. But it takes us back again to Paul's calling, which he holds on to. He's not just standing before them for the sake of a trial. He's standing before them for the sake of the gospel. That's why even to Agrippa, he gives him the invitation to receive Jesus. Festus, same thing. Felix, same thing. Bernice, same thing. The other officials and rulers, we don't know. We don't know who received the message. We don't know what happened to them before they died. We're not sure if that message ended up touching, I don't know, one of the military leaders there or something, and they gave their lives to Christ. But what Paul is doing, he's standing before big people. Not everybody had the opportunity to do that. And even today, not everybody has the opportunity to stand before prime ministers and presidents and stuff like that to preach the gospel. But the way that God gave him the door in was through imprisonment, was through appealing his case to a higher court, all so that he can bring the gospel to ears that are like way up here, right? So all of this reminds us that Genesis 50, I don't remember which verse, the devil means it for evil, but God turns around and makes it for good. So whatever the enemy is trying to do in your life to bring you down, God will take even that for his own glory. So be blessed in Jesus' name, and remember that God has a plan and a purpose for you. He will order your steps so that wherever you go, you are right there in his perfect will. Amen. God bless, and see you for chapter 27.